All right, let's dive into this creativity thing. We got some excerpts from How to Master Creativity and Uncover Your Creative Genius. And, sounds like someone wants to go from just knowing about it to actually being more creative themselves.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's interesting how many people think like creativity is this, like a magical talent. Like you're born with it or you're not.
That's so true. And this source right off the bat says it's not about pulling something out of thin air. It's more about connecting ideas that already exist in new ways, like remixing a song, I guess. You've got all these pieces, but the creative part is putting them together in a way that feels fresh and new.
Exactly. And the source really drives home the point that this is a skill you can actually learn.
Okay.
It even lays out a 5-step process for us.
Woo, a framework. I love a good framework.
First you gather, so you're soaking up knowledge, stuff related to your project, but also just things that you find totally fascinating.
So it's not just about being laser focused. It's also about kind of letting your curiosity run wild on anything that, grabs your attention.
It's like cross-training for your brain.
I like that.
Then you move on to work it. This is where you're consciously playing with the ideas you've gathered, trying different combinations, seeing what happens.
Okay, so far so good.
But here's where things get interesting. It's step 3.
Okay, lay it on me. I'm ready.
Step away.
Huh.
Walk away.
Yeah. Go for a walk. Do something completely different. This isn't procrastinating. It's about giving your subconscious mind space to work its magic behind the scenes.
Oh, so it's like when you're stuck on a problem, then the solution hits you while you're in the shower or something.
Exactly. That's the eureka moment. Step 4. Those unconscious connections suddenly just click into place. And finally, you refine. You test your idea. Get feedback. And tweak it till it shines. This is ringing so true for me. I feel like sometimes the best thing I can do is just step away for a bit and let my mind wander. But this whole idea that anyone can actually develop their creativity, that's pretty cool.
It's empowering, right? And the source even backs it up with research. They talk about these studies on twins that show creativity is only 22% genetic.
Oh, hold on. So the I'm not a creative person excuse, that's BS?
Pretty much. We all have that potential. It's a matter of tapping into it.
Okay, so we can all be creative. It's not just for, the Picassos and the Mozarts of the world.
And speaking of those creative giants, the source digs into how some of the most creative minds throughout history approach their work. There's one example you might find interesting.
All right, I'm always down for a good story. Especially when it involves creative geniuses. Let's hear it.
So, imagine you're Dr. Seuss, and someone challenges you to write a book using only 50 words.
50 words? That sounds almost impossible.
Right. But guess what? That constraint led to one of his most iconic books, Green Eggs and Ham.
Whoa, that's wild. So maybe those limitations actually forced him to be even more creative.
It's like he had to dig deeper to find ways to tell a compelling story within those super strict rules.
Okay, my mind is blown. I'm starting to think differently about my own projects. What if instead of getting overwhelmed by all the possibilities, I actually set some limitations for myself?
That's a great point. And it actually ties in perfectly with some of the actionable steps for boosting creativity that the source outlines.
Okay, now we're talking. I'm ready to unlock my inner creative genius. What's step 1 on this journey?
Well, it might sound kind of counterintuitive, but the first step is to embrace the junk.
Embrace the what now?
The junk. Give yourself permission to create things that aren't perfect. Things that you might even consider bad. It's all part of the process.
Oh, I can definitely relate to that. Sometimes I get so hung up on making things perfect from the start that I end up frozen. I don't even create anything at all.
Yeah, exactly. It's you got to get all the bad ideas out of your system first before you can stumble onto the good stuff.
I like that. So it's about not being afraid to make mistakes, to experiment, and to just let those creative juices flow freely.
Exactly. And who knows, maybe that so-called junk will actually spark an idea that leads to something brilliant.
Okay, step 1. Embrace the junk. Got it. What's next?
Step 2 is to schedule it. Make creativity a habit, not just something you do when the mood strikes. Carve out specific time for creative pursuits, just like you would for anything else that's important to you.
This is so true. It's about treating creativity as a priority, not just something we squeeze in when we have a spare moment. It's about showing up consistently, even when we don't feel particularly inspired, and trusting that the inspiration will follow.
I love that. And sometimes, just that simple act of showing up and engaging in the process is enough to spark those creative juices.
Okay, we've embraced the junk. We've scheduled time for creativity. What's the next step in this process?
Step 3 is finish something. I know it's tempting to get caught up in the endless cycle of tweaking and refining, but sometimes you just need to call it done and move on to the next thing. The act of actually completing projects, even if they're not perfect, builds momentum and confidence.
Oh, I am so guilty of this. I have like a graveyard of unfinished projects on my computer, all because I couldn't bring myself to declare them finished.
I think a lot of us struggle with that. But the truth is, perfection is an illusion. And often, the most valuable lessons come from the process of actually completing things, even if the end result isn't flawless.
Okay, that's a good point. So step 3, finish something, even if it's not perfect. What's next?
Step 4 is all about silencing that inner critic. That little voice in your head that's constantly judging your work and whispering doubts in your ear.
Oh, believe me, I know that voice very well. It can be brutal. Sometimes it feels like my own worst enemy, always undermining my confidence and preventing me from taking risks.
We all have that voice. The key is to learn to manage it, not let it paralyze us.
Easier said than done, right. That inner critic can be so loud and persistent. But how do we actually quiet it down?
It's a process.
Yeah.
And it takes a lot of self-awareness and compassion. The first step is simply recognizing when that inner critic is speaking. And then, learning to separate its voice from your own. Remember, those critical thoughts are not facts. They are just thoughts.
Yeah.
And you have the power to choose which thoughts you give weight to.
Okay, that makes sense. So it's not about completely eliminating the inner critic, but rather about learning to acknowledge it without letting it run the show.
Exactly. It's about finding a healthy balance between striving for excellence and accepting that imperfection is part of the creative journey. And sometimes, the most amazing breakthroughs happen when we push past those critical voices and just take a leap of faith.
Love that. All right, we've embraced the junk, scheduled time for creativity, committed to finishing things, and learned to manage our inner critic. What's the final step in this journey?
Step 5 is share it. The source makes a big point about how accountability can really fuel progress. And sharing your work with others, it invites feedback and helps you connect with people who get it.
That makes sense. Sharing our work can be scary, but it can also be incredibly rewarding. It's about stepping outside of our own bubble and seeing our creations through the eyes of others.
And it's also about building a community, learning from each other, inspiring each other.
This has been such an eye-opening conversation. We've covered so much ground already, from defining creativity to busting the myth of natural talent, and we even have some actionable steps to help us become more creative in our own lives.
It's amazing how much we can uncover just by digging into these excerpts, but there's still more to explore.
Wait, there's more. I'm already feeling inspired.
Oh, yeah. In the next part of our deep dive, we're going to explore some even more intriguing concepts from the source, including a whole new perspective on how to find your unique creative genius and unlock your full potential.
Okay, you've officially piqued my curiosity. I can't wait to hear more. Okay, so last time we talked about those practical steps like, embracing the imperfections and making creativity a habit and even silencing that inner critic. But how do we go from those steps to actually discovering our own creative genius like the source talks about?
That's where things get really interesting. You see, the source suggests it's not about some big revelation or anything. It's more of a journey, like a process of consistent effort and, self-discovery.
Okay, so no shortcuts then.
Nope. No magic formula. But are you ready for the secret?
Hit me with it.
Do the work. Finish something. Get feedback. Improve. Show up again tomorrow. And repeat that, for 10 years or 20 or 30.
Okay, so no overnight success stories here. It's more about the long game.
Right.
Like showing up day after day and honing your craft, letting that consistency build something amazing over time.
Exactly. And the source is really clear about this. Inspiration often follows perspiration. You can't just sit around waiting for the muse to strike. You have to create the conditions for inspiration to show up.
That reminds me of something a photographer once told me. He said, the best camera is the one you have with you.
I love that.
It's sometimes the act of just starting, taking action. That's what sparks the creativity, not the other way around.
Totally. And as you keep going on this journey, the source talks about the importance of exploring different creative avenues, experimenting with different forms of expression. It's about figuring out what really clicks with you, what brings you joy, what lights you up.
I like that. It's not about trying to fit into some, predefined box of what creative is supposed to look like. It's about finding your own unique voice and letting that authenticity shine through in your work.
Exactly. And as you're experimenting and exploring, the source also highlights the importance of seeking feedback from others, not just to, pat yourself on the back when things go well, but to help you identify those areas where you can grow and improve.
That's so true. Sometimes we're so close to our own work that we need that outside perspective to help us see things more clearly. And that's where having a trusted community can be really valuable.
Couldn't agree more. And remember, feedback doesn't have to come from experts or professionals. It can come from friends, family, even online communities. The key is to find people who are supportive, but also willing to, offer constructive criticism that will help you take your craft to the next level.
So earlier we were talking about sharing our work publicly, and the source also mentioned this idea of the gut reaction. What exactly is that?
Oh, the gut reaction.
Yeah.
That's like that immediate visceral response that someone has when they first encounter your work. It's that instant impression, often way more revealing than words can express.
So it's less about conscious critique and more about that raw emotional response. Like, do they lean in or do they lean back? Do their eyes light up or do they glaze over?
Exactly. And the source suggests that paying attention to these gut reactions, both your own and those of others, can offer incredible insight. It's all about tuning into that intuitive sense of, what resonates and what falls flat.
This reminds me of how, when I'm listening to music, sometimes I just know instantly whether I love a song or not. There's no overthinking it. It's just a feeling.
Yeah, that's it. And the source encourages us to trust those gut instincts, both when we're creating and when we're experiencing other people's creative work.
Yeah.
It's about tapping into that deeper level of understanding that goes beyond logic and analysis.
This whole conversation has been a great reminder that creativity isn't just about technical skill. It's about embracing intuition and emotional responses and trusting the journey of self-discovery that unfolds along the way. It's about the process, not just the outcome.
I love that. Beautifully said. And remember, that journey is full of, unexpected twists and turns. Sometimes the most exciting breakthroughs happen when we, deviate from the plan and allow ourselves to be surprised by where our curiosity leads us.
I'm so glad we had this discussion today. It's been so insightful. We've explored the value of consistency and the power of feedback and the importance of trusting our intuition, and I feel like we've just scratched the surface.
There's definitely more to uncover. And in the final part of our deep dive, we'll explore some even more practical tips and strategies for bringing your creative ideas to life. So don't go anywhere.
Welcome back to our deep dive. We've explored so much about this whole creativity thing, but I'm really curious about what other practical tips this source has for actually bringing our creative ideas to life.
You're in luck because the source actually recommends a whole bunch of books that go even deeper into this stuff.
Oh, nice. Like a reading list curated by the experts.
Exactly. Titles like The War of Art by Stephen Pressfield and The Creative Habit by Twyla Tharp.
Ooh, these sound good. I'm always looking for new books to add to my list.
Yeah, they're packed with insights and inspiration from some really big names in the creative world. Definitely worth checking out.
All right, I'm taking notes. But besides hitting the books, what are some other things we can take away from this source today?
Well, on top of those 5 steps we talked about before, the source really emphasizes this idea of recognizing relationships between concepts that seem totally unrelated. It's about making those unexpected connections that can spark new ideas and lead to innovative solutions.
I get that. It's like when you're working on something and suddenly you see a connection to something completely different, something you never would have thought of before.
Yeah, it's like those aha moments where the solution seems to come out of nowhere.
Mm-hmm.
But it's really the result of all those different experiences and ideas you've been exposed to. They're all swirling around in your subconscious.
And then, bam, connection made.
Exactly. It's about training ourselves to see beyond the obvious, to look for patterns and connections that other people might miss. And that ability to connect those seemingly random ideas is something we can actually get better at through curiosity and exploration and, just a willingness to think outside the box.
So it's all about constantly feeding our minds with new information, new experiences, new perspectives. The more diverse our input, the more potential we have for making those unique connections that fuel creativity.
Absolutely. And the other thing to remember is that creativity isn't just for artists or musicians or writers. It's a skill that can help us in literally every area of our lives.
So true.
Like whether we're trying to solve a problem at work or navigate a tricky relationship or just find new ways to enjoy our daily routine. That creative mindset can make all the difference.
This deep dive has been so insightful and inspiring. We've learned so much about the creative process, from practical tips to these big picture concepts. It's amazing how much we can uncover just by taking the time to really dig into this stuff.
It's been such a pleasure exploring these ideas with you. And as we wrap up, I want to leave you with one final thought from the source that I think perfectly sums up everything we've been talking about today. Ready for it?
Lay it on me.
Inspiration only reveals itself after perspiration.
I like that. It's a good reminder that creativity isn't passive, you know? It takes effort and dedication. It takes showing up and doing the work, even when we don't feel inspired.
It's about trusting the process.
So to all our listeners out there, go create, embrace the messiness, celebrate the small wins, and never stop exploring the incredible possibilities that lie within you.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into creativity.